Fellow Redditors, what was a moment where you thought a person you knew might be an actual psychopath? I met an individual who later pled guilty to his involvement in about 14 murders. During an interview about his childhood and personal life, it became very apparent that he had no interest in other people and that they were basically NPCs to him, even his girlfriend and child. He was in a gang and his behavior was basically shadowing the other guys with status. He had a girlfriend because that's what the other guys did. He had a fancy car. He wore the right clothes. The other guys figured out early on that he was not bothered by murder or gunfights, so he was their hitter. During the interview, he was perfectly polite, but utterly flat in his affect and didn't attempt to dissemble or minimize a lot of terrible things that happened to him or the things he'd done. It made for an interesting interview. This one won't be crazy or frightening, but I remember the point at which I recognized sociopathy in my ex. We sat down on his bed at night and I asked him to tell me things about himself, because even though we were dating I knew nothing about him. He could not give an answer beyond surface level on any emotional topic. I looked in his eyes and saw nothingness. I realized why I could never emotionally read him or get any sort of feel. He did tell me after we broke up that he can't feel emotions and how much it sucks. I didn't understand this until much later. Before we dated, I remember him telling me how manipulative he is, with a smile. He lied constantly about everything and had 15 other relationships before me, all ending within a month. Yes, an obvious red flag that I ignored. He would jump from religion to atheism every other month. He would repeat cycles over and over. He was known by everyone and liked by many. Very charming. Had a flirty personality. Loved risk-taking for no reason. Always got into trouble. One thing I've learned is to pay close attention to the first thing someone tells you about themselves. It usually contains volumes of information. I don't have specific moment that's odd. But I have a friend who told me. She is schizophrenic and psychopathic. Layman's terms, she hears voices and doesn't really quite understand, care or feels others' emotions. But what makes her a bit of an anomaly is that the voices in her head tell her to do good things and how other people might be feeling. Tip a little extra: your friend needs a hug right now, go help your coworker with their work, compliment the shoes they are new, you're doing just fine, etc. It's quite interesting. When he told me he was a psychopath. Not even kidding. He's a pretty cool guy though and goes to therapy and everything for it. He does his best to relate to people and judge emotion, but it's difficult for him to hold relationships. Pretty smart and is doing the best he can. Hopefully one of the more light-hearted stories on here. He found God 3 times in the course of a year. Each time after he had been seen doing significant property damage or emotionally abusing a girl he was with. Like the God thing was a quick trick to get people off his ass. I'm a college librarian. He was one of my students who came in a lot. He was super charming and good looking and altogether empty inside. No depth, no emotions, no regard for others. One of our staff straight up said, "That boy's a psychopath." She had been a social worker, so I trusted her opinion and agreed. He collected types of women. He told me about seducing a female, married, military chaplain and getting her to do sexual things she didn't want to. Then he got bored with her and moved on. He eventually got his master's degree and now works on the military base making big bucks, getting everyone else to do his work for him. Sometimes psychopaths are dangerous in other ways. I think one of my university professors was a sociopath. He was brilliant in his field but just didn't function correctly as a human. He set up weird rules of interaction for office hours. He had huge personal bias on people based on things like haircuts. There were rumors of him being the reason for suicides even, due to the way he talked to people that failed final exams, like the last oral exam after you failed the written one 3 times. He would be smiling, smirking, like a small boy whose grandma found him with the hand in the cookie jar, while telling people their years of education were lost. My older sister used to absolutely torture me when I was a kid. When I was 5-6, she was 7-8, I was afraid of bugs. She would spend hours trapping bugs and putting them in my Matchbox cars. Then she'd say, "Hey, scene so forbid, wanna play cars?" I would get super excited because she never wanted to play with me. I'd run to my cars and there would be bugs crawling all over. Then when I was 7, I was obsessed with Barbies. One day she grabbed my favorite Barbie and Ken and threw them under the bed. I stuck my tongue out at her and climbed under the bed to get them. As I army crawled in the cramped space, my arms started to hurt. I was getting pricked all over every time I moved. And I was bleeding. It took me until I was halfway way under the bed to figure out what my psychopath sister had done. She had spent all morning weaving push pins into the carpet so the points would stick up and stab me. She then tricked me into climbing under the bed. So, there I am, halfway in with my precious Barbie and Ken at the back wall. I had to decide to cut my losses and abandon Barbie and Ken, or climb the rest of the way through the Saw-esque minefield and back out. I bit the bullet. Amy, if you read this, duck you. My dad said for years that someone I knew at primary school, 7-11, was a psychopath because he often got in fights with random people and showed no empathy after breaking their bones, and he would often lie about stuff to get them in trouble. I thought he was scary and a bit violent but an alright guy overall. I found out a couple of years ago he's been sentenced to life for murder. When my ex-boss at the youth service actually barricaded the door of her office to stop me leaving. She had me cornered in my wheelchair, the office was too small for me to turn round. Meanwhile my colleagues were outside the office literally trying to break the door down to rescue me. What happened? Did you call the police on her? Was that a correct sentence? Lol, no, but I told her I would have to call the police if she didn't let me out though. 2 male, quite hard streetwise, colleagues told her they would break the door down if she didn't let me out. When I saw them after, they looked more scared than me. Finally she let me out. I sent my resignation letter to her the next day without going back to work. He kicked my dog, and when I told him off, he said something along the lines of, "Well, it's not like it's feeling matter." Another friend said, "How would you feel if we kicked you?" and he said that we couldn't do anything that would hurt him. I think he joined the military, but I honestly have lost all contact. I was in the military for a while. There are a lot of really shitty people in the military. I can confidently say for a fair bit of them, that if they weren't in the military they'd be in prison instead. She kicked my leg while we were ice skating to make me fall. I really hurt my back. I couldn't get up, could barely talk and had trouble breathing. I asked her please to call someone, but she just stood there and laughed at me for a few minutes until I was able to crawl to my phone and call someone. She also said to my adopted brother that he is worth nothing because even his real parents left him in the trash. It was the only time I ever punched someone in the face. My period was late and I had let the dude know it was. First time my period was ever late while on birth control pills, but I had recently switched to a different one. He immediately started blaming me for not taking my birth control right and that if I was pregnant he would kill me. I even told him I doubted I was pregnant and not to worry and that the doctor told me that it might happen. Apparently women are most likely to be murdered when they are pregnant. When I was pregnant I had to have hospital appointments every fortnight, and at every meeting they'd ask how is it at home, how does your partner make you feel, etc. And eventually I asked why and my midwife said I have to ask because statistically partners are more likely to start abusing you when you're pregnant, and statistically it takes someone an average of 13 times of being asked before they admit someone's abusing them, which hands down was one of the most heartbreaking facts I learned while pregnant. I went to university with a guy I am positive is a psychopath. Quite pleasant to be around, but he has no regard whatsoever for you. Quite charming actually, and the best ladies man I've ever seen. But once he ducks them he's done. Like literally they don't exist to him. I've seen him break up 2-year-long relationships of other people then dump the girl the morning after. I suspected he was a psychopath, but we took a psych class together and he confirmed it to me. Like straight up told me he'd been diagnosed as a teen. I wouldn't call him a bad guy, but he didn't see me or anyone else as human. Just things he enjoyed interacting with. Played D&D board games with him for years. Still have him on my Facebook but haven't seen him in like a decade. I knew a guy exactly like this, right down to him being an avid D&D player. That's how we knew him, plus I did community theater with him. He broke up so many couples we knew. He'd worm his way in, sleep with the girl, then act like she didn't exist. We found out that more than one gal was super drunk when they slept with him. One of my friends was married with a kid, ended up pregnant with this dude's kid. She was a super fun person, outgoing, confident. After this, she changed. She was super depressed and just a completely different person. She was afraid to call it great because she was drunk, so she saw it as her fault. Her husband stood by her, but the depression took too big of a toll and they eventually split up. It was so clear she hated herself. What sucks the most is that he was well known for doing this. He thought it was funny. Then a couple of years later he meets a gal, gets married and has 2 kids. He's always posting their happy family pics on FB. Every time I see them, I just think about the destruction he left behind. I have a hard time believing he is faithful to his wife. It's funny you say he didn't see me or anyone else as human. Just think he enjoyed interacting with. I said the exact same thing about this guy to my husband once. Because this guy was super charismatic. So, even though he consistently hurt people, he had this way of making everyone forget about it. I can't explain it, but it's weird. But one time I said to my husband that this guy acted like we didn't have lives outside of him. It's like we're all toys in a toy box and we only come to life when he's ready to interact with us. It was exactly like that. I worked with a girl I knew vaguely from high school. She seemed to be generally well liked and popular. But when she opened her mouth the weirdest comments would pop up. For example, "Did you see the cute tiny frogs out in the back? They make the craziest noise when you squish a bunch at the same time, or there are baby ducks trapped in the pool. They can't get out, it's hilarious." I really couldn't tell if it was for shock value or if she had no idea that it's wrong to kill animals. Her absolute favorite pastime was going to parties just to get them busted. I imagine they were her friends getting in trouble a lot of the time too. I used to work with a guy who would tell me stories about things he did that he thought were hilarious but were actually terrible and humiliating for the person he did them to, including about his own kids. Most of the stuff he did would be kind of like pranks, but they weren't funny unless you really are a serious asshole. He seemed to have no idea how gross other people found it. The part he thought was funniest would be when the other person would cry or get their feelings hurt. I used to ride the same train to work as him and he would always find me and sit with me. I had to start arriving at work at 7 AM just to avoid him. I dated a guy. Turned out he had a fiancé and 8 other girlfriends. I had snooped on him hard and found no evidence. No little trip ups. No indications this was what was going on. I had stayed with him, met his friends, etc. I was shocked when his fiancée called me because she found a picture of me on his phone. It was so calculated and perfect that only a sociopath could pull it off. He had no remorse when I confronted him. In the pool at Girl Scout camp, I playfully splashed another camper and she went ballistic. Her friend stopped her before she got to me. Later the same camper was planning an after-hours fashion show in their cabin. My cabin was going to go, but someone let it slip to a counselor so we stayed in. Turns out it was a naked fashion show and she was sent home. There were other instances of her insanity, but I've blocked them from my memory. What I do remember is having a candle ceremony by the lake where we talked about what happened and the counselors did an excellent job counseling us. Edit to say it is likely she was less psychopathic and more troubled, but the anger she expressed in the pool that day was truly terrifying to me, an 11-year-old or so who had to deal with a mentally unstable mother at home anyway. A naked fashion show? Isn't the whole point of a fashion show, you know, the clothes? You can compare birthday suits. We care for our 2 nephews due to their parents' alcohol use and some other issues. We moved our family 3 hours away so they could stay in familiar town. We already have 3 of our own, 2 of whom have autism. The younger one's dad takes offense to us doing his job, I guess. He says we are trying to steal their kids because ours are retarded, threatened to kidnap our kids so we know how it feels, then said he was going to ear duck our youngest daughter, 4 at time last year, and scramble her brain until she's as retarded as her siblings. We started out trying to have decent relationships with him and mom. But they get angry we won't allow them to lie, or make unrealistic promises to the boys. The little one wet bed after every phone call or contact visit. All calls and visits we insisted be supervised by us to prevent the lies and promises. Oh, and because dad was encouraging his son to attack our son because he has autism and needs to man up. They started going nuts with the threats because we refused to let it be a free-for-all. No, you can't show up unannounced. No, you can't talk before school because it upsets the kids and they need to concentrate on school day. It sounds horrible and I'm not proud to feel this way, but I am starting to hope they just die or go to prison. Boys would be better off without the constant drama and in and out. They won't call for months then call 25x in a few hours because they want to talk now. Mom has 6 deuce, 2 of those boys in car. Still free. Still not labeled habitual offender. Courts have been pushing back her last 3 deuce, including the 2 with the boys, for 2 years. COVID isn't helping, but every time she goes to court for 2 years now, she asks to extend and they do. So she's still drinking, driving without license. They've not paid 1 cent towards boys in 2 years either, which is separate issue from visiting concerns. I hate these ducking people. But I love my nephews too much not to help them. One of my best friends is a fully diagnosed confirmed non-violent psychopath. I've been close friends with him since high school, about 8 years ago. He's also Russian if that makes any difference. He's a good looking dude, like model type. I remember when he transferred to my school during sophomore year I thought he was the coolest dude ever. So did everyone else. Not just the students, the teachers loved him. He was the smoothest dude I've ever met. He's also the most fascinating person I've ever hung out with. I have never seen someone care less about others' opinions or his own well-being. I've seen him get pissed drunk and talk to cops underage. I've seen him do multiple gainers off 60-foot cliffs. I've seen him drive motorcycles over 150 miles per hour. He works in sales and does extremely well. He never tells me how much but I know it's well over 6 figures a year. He can get along with anyone. If I had to go to a place I didn't want to go to or didn't want to interact with people, I'd bring him because he's so smooth. He can talk you into and out of anything. He can make you stay up till 3 AM drinking on a weeknight when you have work the next day. He's not a bad dude, he's just completely emotionless and I kind of like that about him. You can say whatever you want to him and you know he won't get upset. I learned he was a psychopath about 1.5 years ago, and since then, I have watched his behavior every time we hang out. It's so fascinating how much he just doesn't even comprehend other people's opinions. He's not rude or offensive, he just completely disregards what people say. I know everything he says and does is to pander to who he's with, cause I've caught him off guard a few times. But he's extremely good at being your best friend within 5 minutes of meeting you. He's still one of my best friends and every time I hang out with him it's an adventure. He's dating one of my friends and I know he'd never hurt a fly. But if he did, I know he'd feel nothing. Knew a guy in high school. He was a senior when I was a freshman. During early football practice, before contact practice with full pads, he was knocking the shit out of tiny freshmen with a lineman blocking pads. Had wild eyes. Untrustworthy eyes. Having way too much fun. Same kid was in my cousin's fitness gym class and he threw a whole exercise bike at a kid and beat him up because that kid had talked to his girlfriend. This kid later robbed a local cafe. He had pantyhose over his head, was carrying a butcher knife, and took the whole goddamn cash register. Judging from the definition of what a psychopath is, I had a classmate that seemed friendly and charismatic. Always hung out with the popular kids and everyone loved him. And with my naivety I wanted to befriend him because he seemed super cool. But as our friendship moved along, he kept trying to push weird boundaries like sexual shit. He was very manipulative towards me. Somehow I was dumb enough to send him explicit photos. He later showed me nudes of other girls and criticized how they looked in front of me. I was worried about if he had shared my nudes with our friends. He had jokingly said he did to get a rise out of me. I was so ducking hissed. And that is when my parents found out and barred him from coming over and we couldn't remain friends. However, my rebellious ass kept texting him because with his charm was able to convince me to unblock him. He would send lewd text messages and I felt super conflicted about whether I should say something. And I just got tired of it and he turns around and starts quoting Bible verses about the sins of lust and shit like I was the lewd one and he was more righteous than me for throwing scripture in my face after calling him out. And then I went on a mission to warn any girl that came in contact with him. But literally no one believed me. Anytime we were in the same friend group, he would just flip a switch and go back to being a gregarious dude. He never showed any hint of that weird cheaty behavior when others were around, so I basically had no proof other than my personal anecdotes. How could a charming, God-fearing guy be such a scoundrel, right? IDK what his behavior is like now because I blocked him on literally everything he could contact me on. An ex-partner is most certainly a psychopath. He has many of the markers: unstable childhood and adulthood criminality, impulsivity, pathological lying, glib charm, grandiosity, inability to accept responsibility, the list goes on. I am generally a pretty savvy judge of character because I'm a social worker and have been in contact with all personality types, but he had me completely fooled for a short period of time. He's a parasite whose disregard for other people, including his own children, which thankfully are not mine, knows absolutely no bounds. The ease with which he can lie is so unsettling, and when I discovered nearly everything he said was bathed in untruth, I hightailed it out. This is gonna get buried, but it's a good one, so I'll share. When I was in my junior year of high school, I was really good friends with this guy we will call Nigel, obv's not real name. Nigel was a very charismatic guy, always cracking jokes, super fun to be around, and overall what seemed like a good guy. Nothing had ever made me think differently until one afternoon I got let out of school 2 hours early. I was taking college classes so my days were shorter, and Nigel was waiting for me near my car. We were pretty good friends, so when he asked for a ride home I didn't have a second thought, just agreed. As I was taking him home he asked if we could go to the store near his house. I thought NBD it's not too far, but when we got to the parking lot of the store he asked if instead we could go to the park behind the store and hang out for a while. At this point I was mostly just confused. All of these places were within a block of his house. If he wanted to go, why did he need me to drive him? But I agreed to take him to the park and let him know I'll have to head home after that to get ready for work. He agrees and we pull into the park and he starts giving me directions on where he wants me to drop him off. Now this park is pretty big and it's mostly known as a biking trail, and over half of it is just dense forest. Nigel is directing me to take him to the most secluded section you can reach in a car, and by now I'm starting to get worried. There's nothing good that is gonna happen in an abandoned spot in the woods. When I reach the end of the road he starts trying to convince me to come for a little walk with him. Just pouring on all the charm, and I was pretty much second away from going with him when the craziest thing happened. My passenger door, where Nigel was sitting, flew open and it looked like someone or something physically dragged him out of my car and closed the door behind him. Nigel started screaming and banging on the door to be let back in, but I just threw the car in reverse and got the duck out of there. I had no idea what he wanted me in those woods for, but I knew it wasn't good. 2 years later, I had moved away for college and Nigel was working at a local gas station. One day a very popular and pretty girl came in, and as she used the restroom Nigel locked the doors. turned off the open sign and waited for her to come out, where he then murdered her. He was caught within an hour as he was driving her car, with her in the trunk, and trying to find a place to hide the body. After this girl's murder, I got a call from local police asking about Nigel and my relationship with him. Just kind of standard questions. Until they informed me that Nigel had a notebook filled with girls' names and the ways he was going to murder them and where he would leave the bodies. Apparently my name was included. He had planned to lure me into the hiking trail 2 years earlier and stab me to death, leaving me in a thickly wooded section. So yeah, I basically had no idea until he murdered another girl, and I never would have dreamed that my friend could be capable of plotting out and attempting to execute such a horrible plan. I had a friend that treated me like her boyfriend, always asking where and with whom I go. Many times cries that I don't spend time with her but with others. One day I just say that's enough and end that toxic friendship. After all this, she went to our friend Mary and tell her that she needs her phone to text me. Mary was always nice and friendly, so when she asked me why I am so angry about that friend, I tell her true. Then phone rang, and when I answered, it was my toxic friend with giggles. It was me all along. You ruined our friendship. Why? I was always so good to you. I forgive you that you were talking behind my back about me. Our friendship is so great. I know you will never end it. 2 days later, she pretend to be another friend. She tells all of our friends that she don't understand why I am so rough. Tell lies about me, blackmail me, come to my house pretending nothing happened. When I was tired of all that things, I just said to her that I had a boyfriend and he didn't like her, so I would never speak to her again. It was stupid, but it worked. After a year or two, she texted me saying that she changed and she missed me. I said never again, and that was it. During uni, I dated a much older guy who was hellbent on me moving to his hometown and being his housewife once I graduated. Towards my final year in uni, I realized this wasn't what I wanted and tried to break it off numerous times. In hindsight, it's clear he was a bit of a psychopath, because I rejected his initial request to date and he just kept showing up whenever I was so charming and sweet to my parents, would emotionally abuse me and tell me I would never find a job upon graduation, etc. The final straw was when he flipped out at me for wearing a mid-thigh length dress during a holiday in Singapore, locked away my passport and beat me senseless with his briefcase. It's a pretty traumatizing memory and I've blocked out most of it. I played dumb, said I was wrong, and waited for him to sleep before finding my passport and literally fleeing with my purse. I've never been so grateful for a 24-hour airport, because I remember breaking down into tears after passing immigration and just sobbing. I've never bothered to look back or see what he is doing, but he spent the next month calling me and my parents trying to spin that I was being overdramatic and had gone crazy.